The city of Irontide stretched before them, a sprawling mass of cold stone and iron under the dim light of the early morning sun. A soft mist clung to the cobblestone streets, swirling around the statues of long-forgotten heroes that lined the city's central square. Sir Cedric, his armor worn from countless battles, stood tall atop the city wall, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Beside him, Anna, the rogue-turned-mercenary, adjusted her cloak, her sharp eyes scanning the distant road. "The enemy approaches," she said, her voice low but firm. Sir Cedric nodded, his mind already calculating their next move. "We won't let them breach the gates. Gather the men, Anna. The battle begins at dawn." His words carried weight, and the silence that followed spoke of the immense tension in the air. This was no ordinary skirmish, it was a war for their survival, and the stakes were higher than ever. The atmosphere in the war room was thick with tension. Maps were spread out on the table, marking the paths the enemy was expected to take. Sir Cedric stood over them, tracing the routes with his fingers, his mind a whirlwind of strategies. Anna, standing at his side, watched him closely, her eyes never straying from his focused expression. "We need to fortify the east gate," Sir Cedric said, his voice firm. "If they breach that, we'll be surrounded." Anna nodded, her lips tight in determination. "I'll gather the archers. They won't get through that gate." Sir Cedric turned to her, his gaze softening for a moment. "Make sure the reinforcements are ready, Anna. We can't afford any surprises." She gave him a curt nod and left the room, her mission clear. The weight of the coming battle settled over the room, and the sense of impending doom hung heavy in the air. Every decision now would determine the fate of Irontide. The clock ticked closer to dawn, and the air grew colder as the first signs of battle began to stir. Anna stood at the east gate, her bow in hand, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The distant sound of marching feet was growing louder, and the tension in the air was palpable. A group of archers stood with her, ready for the first sign of the enemy. "Stay sharp," Anna said quietly, her voice a low command. "We don't shoot until we see their faces. Hold your fire." The archers nodded, each one steeling themselves for the fight ahead. Anna's heart raced, but her face remained cold and calculated. She knew the stakes. If they failed here, Irontide would fall. She couldn't allow that. Her fingers tightened around the string of her bow as she prepared herself for what was to come. The enemy finally arrived, their silhouettes breaking through the mist as they marched toward the gates of Irontide. Sir Cedric stood at the front of his men, his sword drawn and ready. His heart raced, but his face was a mask of determination. The time for strategy was over, now was the time for action. "For Irontide!" he shouted, his voice echoing across the walls. The soldiers behind him roared in response, their weapons raised in unison. Anna, standing at the east gate, drew her bow and fired the first arrow, sending it flying into the oncoming enemy ranks. The battle had begun. The first arrows from both sides flew, and the clash of metal rang through the air as Irontide's defenders made their stand. The battle raged on, the air thick with the smell of iron and sweat. Sir Cedric fought fiercely, his sword cutting through the enemy ranks with precision. Anna, still at the east gate, moved fluidly between the archers, guiding their aim and ensuring they remained organized. Her movements were calculated, almost graceful, as she directed each shot with purpose. She could see Sir Cedric fighting in the distance, his presence a beacon of hope for the defenders. But the enemy was relentless, and they kept coming, wave after wave. "We hold the line," Sir Cedric shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. His soldiers responded with a roar, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Every swing of the sword, every shot from the bow, brought them closer to either victory or defeat. The sound of clashing swords and battle cries echoed through the streets of Irontide. The enemy's forces were relentless, pushing the defenders back step by step. Sir Cedric stood at the heart of the fray, his sword sweeping through the air with deadly precision. Despite the chaos, his focus never wavered. His soldiers fought with everything they had, but it was clear the tide was beginning to shift. Anna had moved to the front lines, her bow no longer enough to deal with the overwhelming numbers. Her blades were out, and she moved through the enemy ranks with deadly grace, taking down foes in swift, fluid motions. "We can't hold them much longer," Anna said, her voice steady despite the danger around her. "The gates are weakening." Sir Cedric's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the battlefield. "We need reinforcements now." The fight was far from over, but the pressure was mounting. Every second counted. The ground beneath their feet trembled as the heavy footsteps of reinforcements approached. Sir Cedric's heart raced as he caught sight of the backup soldiers charging toward them. He knew this was their last chance. "Hold the line," he shouted, rallying his men. The reinforcements, fresh and ready for battle, collided with the enemy's vanguard, pushing them back momentarily. Anna, catching her breath, stood at Sir Cedric's side. "We may have a chance now," she said, but her eyes never left the enemy. Sir Cedric gave a grim nod. "It's not over yet. They'll regroup soon enough. We need to end this quickly." The air was thick with tension, but the arrival of reinforcements brought a spark of hope. However, Sir Cedric knew that it wasn't the end of the fight. It was just another beginning. The momentum had shifted, but the battle was far from won. Sir Cedric's reinforcements had gained ground, but the enemy's numbers seemed endless. They fought like animals, charging with an almost unnatural ferocity. Anna, now deep within the enemy's ranks, slashed through them with ruthless efficiency. She could hear the screams of dying soldiers all around her, but she remained focused on the task at hand. Her blades never wavered. Sir Cedric, too, continued to fight with unmatched strength, his armor battered but unyielding. His men followed his lead, pushing the enemy back inch by inch. But the cost was high. The defenders were growing weary, their ranks thinning. "Stay strong," Sir Cedric shouted, but even he could see the cracks forming in their defense. They had fought long and hard, but there was no telling how much longer they could hold. The enemy's force seemed endless, and their morale remained unshaken. Sir Cedric's heart sank as he watched his soldiers fall one by one. His mind raced for a solution, but every option felt like a gamble. It wasn't just about strategy anymore. It was about survival. "Anna," he called out, his voice barely carrying over the sounds of battle. She appeared at his side, covered in blood, but still standing strong. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We push through their lines," Sir Cedric said, his voice low and determined. "We don't give them a chance to regroup." Anna nodded, her expression hardening. "I'll take the left flank." "I'll lead the charge from the center," Sir Cedric replied. The battle wasn't over, and there was still a chance to win, but it would take everything they had. The battle reached its peak as Sir Cedric and Anna executed their desperate plan. Sir Cedric led the charge from the center, his sword cutting through the enemy ranks with brutal force. Anna, agile and deadly, moved to the left flank, her blades carving a path through the chaos. The defenders, fueled by their leader's resolve, fought with renewed vigor. The enemy, once so sure of their victory, began to falter. But the price was steep. Many of the defenders had already fallen. Sir Cedric could see their resolve breaking as more of his soldiers were struck down. His own body ached, but he pushed forward, knowing that Irontide's future depended on this moment. Anna, her face set in determination, continued to fight alongside him, her every movement a testament to her strength. Together, they might just have a chance. But as the battle raged on, the question remained, would it be enough? The battle had taken its toll. The smoke from the battlefield still hung heavy in the air, and the once proud defenders of Irontide now found themselves scattered and weary. Sir Cedric stood atop a broken wall, looking out at the remains of the battlefield. The enemy's forces had been driven back, but victory had come at a steep price. His armor was battered, his face smeared with dirt and blood. Around him the wounded were being tended to, but there was no denying the grim reality. "We've won the battle, but the war is far from over," Sir Cedric muttered to himself. Anna, appearing at his side, gave him a solemn look. "We've lost too many, Cedric," she said quietly. "I don't know how much longer we can hold on." Sir Cedric turned to her, his expression hardening. "We'll hold on as long as we have to. Irontide is our home, and we will fight for it." He paused, staring into the distance. "We need to regroup. There's more to come." The war room was quiet, the heavy silence only broken by the occasional rustle of maps or the distant sounds of soldiers moving outside. Sir Cedric and Anna sat at the table planning their next steps. The reports from the scouts were grim, the enemy wasn't retreating, and reinforcements were already on the way. Sir Cedric rubbed his temples, exhausted but resolute. "We don't have much time," he said. "We need to strike first, hit them before they can regroup." Anna nodded, her expression focused. "I'll lead a small group to harass their supply lines. We can slow them down at least." Sir Cedric looked at her, his gaze hardening. "Be careful, Anna. We can't afford to lose you." She gave him a brief, reassuring smile. "I'll be back before they even know I'm gone." With that, she stood up and left the room, her mind already on the mission ahead. The air was thick with tension. Time was running out, and the fate of Irontide hung in the balance. Anna moved quickly through the shadows, her heart pounding as she approached the enemy's supply lines. She could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on her, but her focus never wavered. She had been through far worse, and she knew the stakes. The faint sounds of soldiers talking in the distance reached her ears, but she stayed hidden, waiting for the perfect moment. Her breathing slowed, and her hand rested lightly on the hilt of her blade. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Anna's instincts kicked in, and before the soldier could react, she had him on the ground, his throat slashed in one swift motion. She wiped her blade clean and moved on, determined to complete her task. As she reached the enemy's supplies, she quickly set to work, cutting the ropes that held the crates and setting fire to them. The flames rose quickly, casting an orange glow against the dark sky. "This will slow them down," Anna whispered to herself before disappearing into the night. Back in the city, Sir Cedric paced nervously. He trusted Anna, but every minute she was gone felt like an eternity. The hours stretched on, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. His soldiers had begun to fortify the city further, preparing for another assault, but the sense of unease lingered. Finally, a scout rushed into the war room, breathless and wide-eyed. "Sir Cedric, it's Anna. She's returned, but she's not alone." Sir Cedric's heart skipped a beat. He followed the scout to the gates, his soldiers parting to make way for him. Anna stood at the front, covered in blood but alive, her expression unreadable. She had succeeded in her mission. There was no doubt about that. But the look in her eyes told Sir Cedric that something had changed. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tense. Anna's gaze met his, cold and distant. "We've made our move," she said softly. "But the enemy is closer than we thought. They'll be here by morning." The war room was filled with a palpable sense of urgency. Sir Cedric stood at the head of the table, his mind racing as he reviewed the latest reports. Anna, now seated beside him, looked equally grim. The enemy was closer than they had anticipated, and they were preparing for a full-scale assault. "We need to act fast," Sir Cedric said, his voice sharp. "If we don't strike first, we'll be the ones under siege." Anna nodded in agreement, her eyes narrowed. "We can't afford to let them get any closer." Sir Cedric's gaze shifted to the map in front of them. The lines of defense were thinning, and the enemy was relentless. "We'll divide our forces," he said, pointing at the map. "Anna, you'll take the left flank. I'll lead the charge at the center." The room fell silent as the weight of the plan settled in. They were running out of time, and every move now would determine their fate. The night before the battle felt heavier than ever. Sir Cedric stood alone on the city walls, staring out into the distance. The air was cold, and a thick fog had rolled in, shrouding the battlefield in an eerie quiet. His thoughts weighed heavily on him. This was their last chance. If they couldn't hold the line tomorrow, Irontide would fall. "I've led men into battles before," he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible, "but this feels different." The wind picked up, rustling the banners that flew above the walls. Behind him, the sounds of the city preparing for the coming assault could be heard. Soldiers sharpening weapons, the low murmur of prayer, and the occasional shout of command. Anna appeared at his side, her expression unreadable. She placed a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. "We'll hold," she said simply, her voice steady. Sir Cedric turned to look at her, the determination in her eyes matching his own. "We will," he agreed. And with that, they prepared for what was to come. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the city of Irontide was ready. The soldiers were positioned along the walls, their weapons gleaming in the early sunlight. The battle was about to begin. Sir Cedric stood at the head of his forces, his armor reflecting the rising sun. The tension in the air was palpable. Every soldier knew what was at stake. "We fight for Irontide," Sir Cedric called out, his voice strong and commanding. The soldiers cheered in response, their voices rising in unison. Anna, standing at his side, gave him a brief nod, then turned to lead her archers into position. The enemy's silhouette could already be seen on the distant horizon, marching towards the city with grim determination. "We hold the line or we die trying," Sir Cedric muttered to himself. He knew the cost of this battle would be high, but he was ready. They had no choice but to fight. The battle began in earnest as the first wave of the enemy struck Irontide's walls. Sir Cedric led the charge from the front, his sword flashing as he cut through the enemy ranks. The walls trembled with the force of the assault, but the defenders stood firm. Anna's archers unleashed a barrage of arrows, the projectiles raining down on the enemy with deadly accuracy. The enemy's ranks faltered for a moment, but then they regrouped, pushing forward with renewed vigor. Sir Cedric gritted his teeth as the fight raged on. He could hear the sounds of metal clashing, the screams of fallen soldiers, and the roar of the battle as it consumed everything around him. Anna's voice rang out above the chaos, calling for a retreat to the secondary line. Sir Cedric nodded and pulled back, directing his forces to fall back strategically. They couldn't afford to be overrun, not yet. The enemy's relentless assault continued, and the defenders of Irontide began to feel the weight of the battle. Sir Cedric paced in the war room, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "We've lost too many," he muttered, staring at the map before him. Anna, standing nearby, was equally grim. The enemy was pressing hard on every front, and their numbers seemed endless. "We can't hold out much longer," she said, her voice low. "They'll breach the walls if we don't do something soon." Sir Cedric nodded, his face hard. He was running out of options. "We have one chance," he said, turning to Anna. "We'll launch a counter-offensive. Hit them where they least expect it. We might not get another opportunity." Anna's eyes narrowed, and she gave a slow nod. "I'll gather the forces. It's now or never." The weight of their decision hung in the air, but there was no turning back. The fate of Irontide rested on this final push. The final push had begun. Sir Cedric and Anna led their forces in a surprise attack, striking the enemy from the rear. The enemy, caught off guard, faltered for a moment, and the defenders of Irontide pushed forward with renewed vigor. The battle was fierce, but the tide had begun to turn. Sir Cedric's sword cleaved through the ranks, while Anna's archers picked off key targets from a distance. The sound of clashing steel filled the air, and the ground beneath them trembled with each strike. Slowly but surely, the defenders gained ground. Sir Cedric's heart raced as the enemy's lines began to crumble. But even as victory seemed within reach, he knew that this battle would not be easily forgotten. The cost had been high, and the war was far from over. "For Irontide," he shouted, rallying his men. With a final determined push, the enemy's forces broke, and the defenders stood victorious. But the price of that victory would haunt them all. The city of Irontide was quiet after the battle. The streets, once filled with the sound of soldiers fighting, were now eerily still. Sir Cedric stood atop the city walls, looking out at the battlefield below. The enemy had been defeated, but at what cost? The city was scarred, and the defenders were few. His heart felt heavy as he surveyed the damage. "We've lost so much." Anna's voice broke through his thoughts, and he turned to find her standing beside him. She, too, wore the weight of the victory in her eyes. It was a hard-won victory, but the war is far from over. Sir Cedric nodded, his gaze never leaving the field below. We've bought ourselves time, but we must rebuild. There's no rest yet. The silence between them spoke volumes. Their fight was not just for survival, it was for the future of Irontide. And that future was uncertain. The mood in the war room was grim. Sir Cedric stood at the head of the table, going over the reports from the scouts. The enemy was regrouping, but their numbers had been severely diminished. Still, the threat was far from eliminated. We can't afford to let our guard down, Sir Cedric said, his voice low but firm. We may have won a battle, but the war continues. Anna, seated nearby, looked up from the map with a focused expression. We need to fortify the eastern border. They'll likely come through there next. Sir Cedric nodded. Agreed. We'll need every archer we have. The sound of a door opening interrupted them, and a scout rushed in, breathless. Sir Cedric, the enemy has already begun their march. They're not waiting for reinforcements. They're coming for us. The urgency in the scout's voice left no room for doubt. The battle was far from over. The battlefront was once again in motion. The enemy had begun their march toward Irontide's eastern border, and the defenders were preparing for the next wave of the fight. Sir Cedric and Anna had positioned their forces strategically, but the pressure was mounting. The enemy was more organized this time, their tactics more refined. Sir Cedric paced back and forth, his mind racing. He had to make the right decisions. Anna, standing at his side, sensed his unease. "What's troubling you?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. Sir Cedric stopped and looked at her. "We're running out of time. If we don't stop them at the eastern border, they'll have us surrounded. This could be our last stand." Anna's eyes locked with his, a steely determination in her gaze. "Then we make sure it isn't. We'll fight until the end. Together." Her words were a promise, and Sir Cedric knew deep down that they would give everything to protect their city. The battle at the eastern border was nothing short of brutal. The enemy's forces pushed forward with relentless intensity, their numbers still vast despite their previous losses. Sir Cedric and Anna fought at the heart of the conflict, their determination unwavering. "We can't let them breach the gates!" Sir Cedric shouted, rallying his men. Anna, leading the archers, fired volley after volley of arrows, picking off key targets in the enemy's ranks. But despite their best efforts, the enemy kept coming. With every strike, every fall of a soldier, the battle seemed more hopeless. Sir Cedric's breath came in ragged gasps as he swung his sword, cutting down another foe. Anna's movements were swift, deadly, and precise. The enemy was relentless, and their soldiers showed no signs of fatigue. "Hold the line," Sir Cedric called out. They had to hold. Failure was not an option. The battle raged on, but slowly, the defenders began to push the enemy back. Sir Cedric and Anna led the charge, rallying their troops with every step. The enemy, once so sure of their victory, started to falter. Sir Cedric's sword struck true, cutting down one enemy after another. Anna's archers, now fully coordinated, fired in perfect harmony, taking down key targets in the enemy's command. The sound of the retreating enemy was deafening, as their lines began to crumble. Sir Cedric's heart pounded in his chest as he saw the first signs of victory, but he knew better than to celebrate too soon. "Don't let up now," he called, his voice hoarse. "We finish this." With one final, decisive push, the enemy's forces broke, and Irontide's defenders stood victorious. But the cost of this battle had been immense, and the city would never be the same. Sir Cedric and Anna shared a brief, weary glance. They had won, but the war was far from over. In the aftermath of the battle, the city of Irontide was still. The streets that had been filled with the sounds of fighting now lay silent, the bodies of the fallen scattered like broken stones. Sir Cedric walked through the streets, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. He had seen battle before, but this was different. The city he had sworn to protect was now scarred, its people shaken. Anna joined him at his side, her eyes scanning the destruction around them. "We won," she said softly. though the words felt hollow. Sir Cedric stopped and looked at her. "Did we?" he asked, his voice distant. The cost of the victory was too high. The defenders had triumphed, but at the expense of so many lives. Anna glanced at him, her face hard. "We fight on. That's all we can do." Sir Cedric nodded. "For Irontide," he said quietly. And together, they walked toward the war room, where the next steps of the battle would soon be planned. The war room was somber, filled with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Sir Cedric sat at the table, staring at the map in front of him. Anna stood beside him, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the door as though waiting for something, or someone. "They'll be back," she said, breaking the silence. "The enemy won't let this stand." Sir Cedric glanced up at her, his face weary but resolute. "We have to be ready. We've held them off twice, but I don't know how much longer we can keep doing this." Anna nodded, understanding the depth of his concern. "I'll organize the scouts. We'll know when they're coming." Sir Cedric took a deep breath. "Do it, and gather the men. We'll need every hand." The tension in the room was palpable. Every move now carried the weight of survival. The enemy was relentless, and the defenders of Irontide would have to dig deep to hold their ground once again. The scouts returned just as Sir Cedric had feared. The enemy was indeed regrouping, and their numbers were larger than anticipated. "They'll be here within the week," the scouts said, out of breath from the long journey. Sir Cedric clenched his fists, the news hitting him like a blow. They had no time to waste. "We'll need to strengthen our defenses," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Anna, gather the archers. I want them posted along the western and eastern borders." Anna nodded, her face grim but determined. "We'll have them ready." Sir Cedric turned to the rest of his commanders. "Prepare the men. We need to be ready for a fight like never before. If we're to stand a chance, we'll have to make this our final stand." The room fell silent, each person knowing the weight of his words. The next battle would determine everything. There would be no retreat. The mood in Irontide had shifted. People prepared for what was to come, but there was a sense of inevitability hanging in the air. Sir Cedric walked through the streets once more, but this time, the faces he passed seemed more resigned, as though they knew this might be their last night in the city. Anna joined him again, her cloak billowing in the wind. "It's going to be a long night," she said softly, as if reading his thoughts. Sir Cedric didn't answer at first. His mind was already on the battlefield, strategizing, calculating. But he knew that, no matter what happened, the heart of Irontide still beat within its people. "We fight because we have to," he said at last, his voice low but steady. "We fight for this city, for everyone who believes in it." Anna nodded, her gaze unwavering. "For Irontide," she said simply. And as they walked back to the war room, they both knew that this fight would be their most difficult yet. The dawn arrived with an eerie stillness. Sir Cedric stood at the gates of Irontide, his armor gleaming in the early morning light. The enemy was near. His soldiers stood ready, but there was no denying the tension in the air. Anna approached, her face set in stone. "They're almost here," she said. "We can't afford to make a mistake." Sir Cedric nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the first signs of the enemy appeared. "We'll hold them here. This is where we make our stand." Anna stood beside him, her expression hardening. "And if we fall?" she asked, her voice low. Sir Cedric turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "Then we fight, until the very end." The first sounds of the enemy marching could be heard now, and Sir Cedric's heart beat in time with the rhythm of the approaching storm. Irontide's fate would be decided today. The battlefield was an inferno. The enemy had launched their final assault on Irontide with a ferocity unlike anything they had faced before. Sir Cedric stood at the forefront, his sword raised high as he led his forces into the fray. The sound of clashing steel echoed through the air, and the ground shook with every strike. The defenders of Irontide fought with everything they had, but the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. "For Irontide," Sir Cedric shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. His men roared in response, their spirits fueled by his leadership. But even as the battle raged on, Sir Cedric knew that this might be the end. He could see Anna fighting alongside him, her blades flashing in the smoke-filled air. Her focus was unwavering, her every movement calculated and precise. But the enemy was relentless, and they continued to press forward, wave after wave. The battle seemed to stretch on endlessly. Sir Cedric's muscles burned, and his breath came in ragged gasps. His soldiers were beginning to falter, their energy waning, but they refused to back down. Anna, equally exhausted, stood by his side, her eyes locked on the enemy's advancing line. "We can't keep this up," Anna said through clenched teeth. If we don't stop them now, they'll overwhelm us." Sir Cedric's eyes scanned the battlefield. The enemy's leaders were positioned at the rear, directing the assault. "We take out their command," he said, his voice firm. "If we can break their leadership, the rest will crumble." Anna nodded, her expression fierce. "I'm with you." Together, they cut through the enemy ranks, pushing toward the commanders who were directing the chaos. With every step, the weight of the battle felt heavier, but they fought on, determined to end it once and for all. Sir Cedric and Anna reached the enemy commanders, their blades striking down foes as they moved. The enemy leaders were surprised by their sudden assault, but it was too late to stop them. Sir Cedric fought with a fury fueled by desperation, his every strike an extension of his will to protect Irontide. Anna was beside him, her every move a blur, as she incapacitated one enemy after another. "This ends now," Sir Cedric roared, his sword cutting down the leader in front of him. The enemy's command structure began to crumble, and chaos spread through their ranks. The once organized assault began to falter as the soldiers lost their direction. But even with the enemy in disarray, Sir Cedric knew they couldn't let up. "We finish this!" he shouted, rallying his forces to press the attack. Irontide's defenders, bolstered by the fall of the enemy's leadership, surged forward with renewed energy. With their leadership crumbling, the enemy's forces began to retreat, but not without a final desperate push. Sir Cedric and Anna pursued them, cutting down any who dared to stand in their way. The momentum had shifted, but the battle was far from over. "We can't let them escape," Anna said, her voice filled with determination. "If they regroup, it will be even harder to stop them next time." Sir Cedric nodded, his armor battered, but his resolve unbroken. "We finish this now." The defenders of Irontide fought with renewed strength, pushing the enemy back and cornering them in a final decisive stand. The sun had risen fully now, casting light on the blood-soaked battlefield. Sir Cedric's heart pounded in his chest as he struck down the final enemies who had dared to fight. When the last of the invaders fell, he looked around, surveying the battlefield. Irontide had survived, but the cost was immense. The battle was finally over. Irontide had survived, but the city would never be the same. Sir Cedric stood in the midst of the battlefield, the weight of the victory settling in. His body ached and his mind was numb, but there was a sense of relief that washed over him. Anna approached, her face battered, but determined. "We did it," she said quietly. Sir Cedric looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "We did," he said, his voice heavy. But the cost of the battle was clear. So many had fallen, and Irontide's future was uncertain. The city was scarred, but it still stood. "We rebuild," he said firmly. "We honor those who fell, and we rebuild." Anna nodded, her expression resolute. "For Irontide." And together, they walked through the ruined streets, knowing that the hard work of rebuilding would soon begin. But for now, there was only silence. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Irontide was at peace.